Om Shanti. This is Maureen from Australia. I came across the Brahma Kumaris in early 1977. I had declared myself an atheist when I was just 11 years old because I couldn't understand why there was so much suffering in the world. I couldn't accept that it was God's will. I couldn't accept that God would create a world with so much suffering. So this was really my search. I wasn't looking for God, but I was looking to understand suffering. So when I was 11, I refused to go to a Catholic high school because I just couldn't go along with the ideas about God. I didn't believe in God. In my lesson, one of the lessons that I studied at school was the Indonesian language. And that actually was a very interesting time of my life because I realized I wasn't looking for God, but I was looking for the philosophy of karma, because this, for me, held all the answers that I was looking for. When I was 19, I studied Buddhism, wanting to go further into the understanding of karma. And also because Buddhism was a teaching that helped one to progress, to move forward spiritually, and yet I didn't have to embrace the idea of God as with Hinduism. In fact, I tried to study Hinduism, but I really couldn't understand it. It's quite a complex study for a young person from another culture. So I traveled to India at that time. I traveled to look for a monastery so that I could go deeper into the study, because in Australia at that time, we didn't really have any temples or teachers. It was a very much a Christian culture in Australia at that time. Now it's very multicultural, multi-faith. But at that time, it was hard to find anything outside the Christian faith. But when I was in India, I went to Bodh Gaya, Dharamsala, but I was a little bit confused because I had studied Buddhism from books. And according to what I understood the Buddha taught, I had become vegetarian, and I wasn't looking for a guru or a master to follow. I was looking for a study, because what I understood Buddha saying is that we can all attain enlightenment. It's really up to us to study and practice and realize. So I wasn't looking for worship. But in the ashrams or the monasteries that I visited, I found that they weren't vegetarian, which I couldn't understand, as Buddha taught loving compassion. And so I became a vegetarian because I wanted to embrace that particular teaching. Buddha also, as I said, didn't teach us to worship, and yet there was so much worship. In fact, Buddha was made a god rather than any other belief in God. There was such a belief in Buddha as if it was God. And in particular, there wasn't equality between men and women. And I thought, if I'm going to take up this as a lifelong practice, I would also have to struggle to be able to take the case of women forward within Buddhism. And in fact, I said to a monk at one point, I can become a monk, but I can't become a nun, because I couldn't accept this inequality. So when I returned to Australia, I came across the Brahma Kumaris. I went along to the centre, but I didn't really, I enjoyed the first lesson because it was all about soul, and soul consciousness was an equality between male and female. In fact, it was going beyond gender, nationality, culture to unite us as all spirits in one brotherhood. I also discovered that the Brahma Kumaris were vegetarian, so that ticked another box. And also that they didn't worship but studied and meditated. So these were the three things I was looking for. However, when they mentioned God, that was a little bit of a sticking point for me because as I said, I wasn't looking for God. However, when I did the meditation on the second lesson and listened to the guided meditation, I experienced everything that was being said. So I experienced the love, the peace, and bliss in that meditation. So although I didn't want to believe in God, I wanted more of that experience. And so I went back, I finished the course, I became very involved, not only as a karma yogi, which I think is quite a wonderful practice to really put in action these teachings, but also very quickly I was able to share my experiences and became a teacher, because that's really what a teacher in the Brahma Kumaris is sought after for, not for their academic understanding, but the application in practical life, how these teachings really help us to face all the difficulties that we have in life. So all of the concepts, the ideas about God were very different in the Brahma Kumaris. In fact, the name I most prefer for God, because even that word God is still not that comfortable for me, but the name Sardar Shiv, the constant one, the benevolent one, these are the two words that I really found were most resonant with me, because in this world everything is changing. Finances, health, relationships, and in fact during this last year everything's changing. We can hardly recognize the world anymore. So this experience that I had in meditation of the constancy of God. So whether I was being good or not so good, whatever was going on in my world, when I'd sit to meditate, I'd feel this constant, eternal presence that I think was the most attractive element, because the other most impactful transformation in myself was to be emotionally independent. And this was only possible because I was getting all that I wanted from this connection. So I didn't feel so needy and so demanding of other people to fulfill my needs. Of course, it's still a work in progress. I wouldn't say I'm 100% in that area, but definitely I became more emotionally independent. And that helped me to become also more constant and stable in my life. So this word constant is something that resonated with me very much. And as you know, the organization is run by women. And the founder, or the instrument, as he would say, in this organization is Bapdada. And he modeled the example of being an instrument. He never took any credit for anything because he felt that he was just an instrument for God. And as I've been able to increase that awareness in my life, that also helps me to be more constant, because I don't worry. I don't feel that things are my responsibility. In fact, recently I moved to Taiwan. I heard this in a voice that said, go to Taiwan and open a center. I speak very little Chinese. I lived in Hong Kong for many years, but that's a different Chinese language, Cantonese, and this was Mandarin. I didn't have much money. People had given me money knowing that I was going to Taiwan to open a center, but just a few $1,000. And I only knew one person, and I knew I couldn't stay with her. So I went there really as an instrument, because I felt that God was asking me to do this. And if God is asking me to do this, then it's his task and not mine. It's his worry and not mine. And if it doesn't work, that's also not much to do with me. So it's been an amazing experience of everything working without language, without money, without, connections. Everything has really fallen into place. And in fact, we have 2 centers in Taiwan, and good support of the local people and the Indian community there as well. So this is the practical experience that I've had in my life from the beginning. But I think Taiwan was probably one of the most amazing examples of just having that consciousness of being an instrument and how everything can happen through that. And so this was modeled by the founder Bapdada, and of course subsequently others who followed in his footsteps, like Dadi Prakashmani. She completely was an instrument as well. So having these mentors has helped me to embrace this. And the other main aspects that we have been guided in from Bapdada, his message to us when he was leaving the body was to be incorporeal, viceless, and humble. Nirakar, nirvikar, nirahankar. And these are the 3 main principles that we need to embrace in life to free ourselves. So incorporeal means I'm not this body. I'm not male or female. I don't belong to a particular culture or religion. I am soul, as we are all soul. Backstage, we are all the same. And so that easily leads us into being egoless, because if we don't have any identity of the body, of course it's much easier to be egoless. And then to be viceless, I think it takes a lot to understand the influence of anger, greed, attachment, ego, and lust on our life. And these are called vices. A vice is something used in carpentry or metalwork to grip. We get gripped by these vices. We don't want them. And so the only way to free ourselves is to understand the subtle pulls of these vices, because they're also what take us away from God. I have a great love for God, but sometimes God is not in my mind because I'm overtaken by some other feeling. It's almost like I'm hijacked by ego or some other vice. So when I'm able to recognize the very subtle aspects of attachment, of lust, of anger, of the vices, then I can refine and purify myself. And this is done through the meditation practice. So one is by being in that incorporeal stage, niraka, because then there's no influence of anything physical. And it's almost like I'm resetting myself back to my origin. It's just like when everything gets out of order on a computer or even on our phone, we can reset it to the original setting. So I need to reset myself. And to do that, I need to practice being incorporeal. And being viceless, I can rediscover. I don't have to become peaceful, become happy, become loving. I need to realize that I am a being of peace. I am a being of love. I am a being of joy and bliss. So when I'm able to practice that awareness of who I am, then I can go beyond these vices. And when I'm able to, of course, to do these two things, I will naturally be humble, because all the ego is to do with the false identification of the body. And so these three really go hand in hand, and by practicing one, the other one will be developed. So these few keys are really my lifelong journey to be incorporeal, viceless, and humble, because that's when I can really be free. And what is a spiritual practice for but to be free? The other key aspect about this study is the deeper understanding of purity. And I think you know that sat is a prefix that's used both for purity and truth, because they're not very different. Though people are very attracted to truth, they're not very attracted to that word purity. But as is said in India, purity is the mother of peace and happiness. I can tell how pure I am by how peaceful and happy I am. So this became a very good indicator for me on this journey of purity, because purity, I think, often brings quite a judgmental consciousness around it. That's why I think people don't like this word pure, because it's very easy to judge on that basis. But if I understand it as being peaceful and happy, when I'm pure, I will be peaceful, I will be happy. And think about it. How can you be peaceful and happy if you're not pure, if you're not aligned with truth, Satogun? So, these teachings and the depth have been a great joy for me. It's made my life worthwhile. Really, I love to study. I'm always studying, and studying internally, not necessarily always reading, but taking an idea, delving into that in my meditation, and during the day thinking about those ideas so that I can go deeper and really understand this practice and what it means to be completely free. So thank you so much for inviting me to share my experiences. Of course, I have much, much more to share, but this is a lovely month, the month of January, when Brahma Baba actually became free, karmatit, free from any bondage of the body. This is the goal for all of us, to free ourselves from any karmic bondage. Om Shanti.